There's always been controversy on the internet, but in 2023, a name started echoing across live streams, comment sections, and courtrooms. Not because of talent, insight, or creativity, but because of deliberate chaos. That name was Johnny Somali. Born Anwar Abdullahi, Johnny Somali isn't your typical content creator. He didn't rise through talent or comedy. He didn't earn his place through innovation or charisma. He forced his way into the spotlight with one of the most brazen and offensive content strategies the internet had seen since the early days of 4chan. And unlike the prank channels of the past, Johnny wasn't just towing the line, he was kicking it in the face. He emerged in the streaming world at a time when IRL content was booming. People like Ice Poseidon had already laid the groundwork for chaotic street content. But Johnny? He went further. Instead of playing a character, he played a villain. Loud, offensive, targeted, and for reasons still baffling to many people They watched as he harassed Japanese citizens. They watched as he barked racist slurs on public trains. They watched as he got chased by angry locals, slapped in the face, even arrested, and laughed about it afterward. They watched the self-proclaimed IRL king proudly disrespect cultures he didn't understand, only to call it content. But this wasn't just some edgelord stunt gone viral. This was a full-blown pattern of behavior, turning real people into props for shock value, and pushing the boundaries of free speech to their ugliest extremes. By the end of 2023, Johnny Somali had become a case study, a walking red flag. And by 2024, he wasn't just hated, he was wanted. This is the story of how Johnny Somali built a digital empire on ignorance, and how the very internet that fueled his rise eventually began to tear it all down. Before he was Johnny Somali, Anwar Abdullahi was just another face in the crowd. Born in the US to Somali parents, his early life was relatively undocumented, especially compared to the transparency of his chaotic streaming career. But sometime during the post-pandemic streaming boom, he saw the rise of personalities like FauciTube, Ice Poseidon, and Aiden Ross, and he took notes. Not about building a brand or telling stories, but about attention, controversy, noise. In 2022, Johnny began dabbling in live streams. At first, they were forgettable low-quality content with little identity. But when he began traveling, something changed. He discovered Japan. It was there, on the clean, orderly, respectful streets of Tokyo, that Johnny began to craft his identity. Not as a traveler, not as a documentarian, but as an antagonist. He quickly realized that his loud behavior stood out in Japan, that breaking the social code could trigger reactions, that yelling racial slurs on trains or mocking locals could go viral. And so he did it over and over again. It wasn't just trolling, he was deliberately seeking outrage. His stream titles were bait, his behavior was cruel, and his content was rooted in mocking Japanese culture for laughs. Mostly from a Western audience that didn't have to deal with the consequences. By mid-2023, Johnny Somali was gaining notoriety across YouTube, TikTok, and Reddit. Not because people liked him, but because they couldn't believe what he was getting away with. He'd walk up to Japanese women, call them names. He'd harass workers at convenience stores. He'd scream Hiroshima or Pearl Harbor in public, all while holding a selfie stick and laughing. And here's the sick part, it worked. People clicked. Clips circulated. His follower count grew, and so did his ego. In his mind, he was the star of a show. In everyone else's mind, he was the villain of a modern social media nightmare. It was only a matter of time. By August 2023, Japanese authorities had seen enough. Johnny Somali wasn't just being annoying anymore, he was breaking laws. Harassment, disruption of public peace, even suspected incitement of violence. And unlike the US, where public disturbances often result in warnings or slaps on the wrist, Japan takes social order seriously. In one of his now infamous live streams, Johnny walked into a busy train station, began yelling racial slurs, and aggressively approached several locals. He claimed it was all just jokes and freedom of speech, but Japanese police didn't see it that way. Within hours, he was detained. The arrest wasn't glamorous. He didn't go out in a blaze of glory. He was tackled, cuffed and taken into custody like anyone else disturbing the peace. But in typical Johnny Somali fashion, he tried to spin it into content. He smirked in court. He laughed about the process. And he doubled down on the very behavior that landed him in trouble. He told his audience, "I'm famous now. I'm a legend." But here's what he didn't expect. The Japanese justice system is not a content farm. It's quiet, efficient, ruthless. He spent weeks in detention without bail, under strict monitoring. And for the first time, his online persona couldn't save him. International media picked up the story. American YouTuber arrested for harassing Japanese citizens made headlines from Tokyo to New York. And while some online trolls cheered him on, the wider internet turned cold. Suddenly, the mask of irony didn't protect him. This wasn't a prank. This was a felony. And when he finally got deported, escorted out of the country under heavy security, he wasn't seen as a rebel. He was seen as a disgrace. You'd think deportation would humble a man, that sitting in a foreign jail cell, far from the memes and donations, would change a person. But when Johnny Somali returned to the US, he wasn't quiet. He was louder than ever. He hit the ground running, streaming from airports, shouting offensive catchphrases, mocking his own arrest like it was a badge of honor. In his mind, he'd survived international cancellation. He called himself uncancelable. He claimed to be the most famous man in Japan. And he wasn't done. Now back in the States, Johnny doubled down on chaos. He didn't pivot to positivity. He didn't reflect. He attacked. In Miami, he live-streamed himself harassing fast food workers and homeless people. In Los Angeles, he filmed confrontations with strangers, provoking them for reactions. Every incident, every scream, every slap it was all just more content. And this time, he wasn't alone. He began appearing on other IRL streamers' feeds, teaming up with personalities who fed off the same energy. Some encouraged him, others used him for views. But all of it added fuel to the fire. He even started name-dropping bigger streamers, taunting Ice beside him, trying to bait Kai Cenat, attempting to pick fights with Sneeko and others just to get a reaction. In his mind, drama was currency, and he was the richest man on the internet. But here's what he missed. While he was chasing clout, the consequences were catching up. YouTube began flagging his channels. TikTok banned several accounts. Reddit threads turned from laughing at him to organizing mass reports. And behind the scenes, legal teams began paying attention. Because Johnny wasn't just causing drama now, he was entering dangerous territory. In one stream, he was nearly assaulted after screaming racist slurs at a group of strangers in Atlanta. In another, he was chased out of a parking lot by people who didn't care about content. What he called trolling was starting to look a lot like self-destruction. Johnny Somali knew the backlash was coming. The bans, the criticism, the mounting pressure from all sides. But he also knew something else. Controversy sells. So he flipped the script. Suddenly, Johnny wasn't the villain. He was the victim. "They're only banning me because I'm black," he shouted in a viral stream. If a white guy said this stuff, nobody would care. It was a strategy rooted in chaos, a way to reframe his deliberate provocations as acts of resistance. And for a moment it worked. A handful of trolls and contrarian YouTubers parroted his line. They said cancel culture was going too far. They called him a martyr for free speech. But the illusion didn't last, because the more people looked into his streams, the harder it became to buy that narrative. This wasn't about being edgy. It was about cruelty, harassment, degradation. Johnny wasn't being targeted. He was targeting others, over and over again. From Asian Americans to elderly bystanders, no one was off limits. He yelled slurs. He mocked accents. He invaded personal space and filmed people who clearly didn't want to be filmed. And yet, every time he got called out, Johnny doubled down. "I'm being silenced. They're scared of the truth. I'm just a comedian." But the internet had seen it all before. The fake victim arc, the performative tears, the crocodile cries of censorship. And this time, it wasn't buying it, because playing the victim only works when you have credibility. and by now Johnny had spent every last drop.